Well, good morning and welcome to the August installation of the Toolkit, where we provide some business education for all of you. Today, we have our guest with us, Carol McCorkle of Farm Bureau Insurance, and we'll get with Carol in just a minute. But we want to thank, first of all, our sponsors, the City of St. Cloud, Osceola County, Orlando Health St. Cloud, OUC, the reliable one, the Osceola Realtors, and Toho Water Authority. And we encourage you to make the toolkit part of your monthly business calendar. So let's talk about Carol since she's here this morning. Carol, we're very pleased to have you, but we want to let you all know that Carol is an active member of the Chamber Board of Directors, and her relationship with the Chamber goes way back. In the past, she's chaired golf committee. She's been on the Christmas parade committee, and just recently this summer, July, uh, that was last month. It seems longer than that. She co-chaired politics in the barn for us and did a phenomenal job. She's also been associated with such fundraisers and nonprofits as Cash for Kids, and of course, deep involvement with the Silver Spurs organization. So we want to invite Carol to enlighten us about business insurance. Good morning, Carol.
Good morning, Dirk. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, today we get to talk about business insurance, and I know everybody's so excited to learn more about it. It's an interesting topic, and it's such a valuable part of your business, and to make sure you are insured properly. So I'm excited. I was very thankful that y'all asked me. So thank you, Dirk. But let's get started. So today we're going to talk about business insurance. We're going to talk about the key policy types and practical strategies for managing your risk. The the basic on insurance really is you're going to start with your core coverage types, understanding your risk, the gaps and mistakes that happen, why you might need an umbrella, the claims process, and then practical strategies. All right, let's start out now with when you call in and you talk to your insurance agent and you want to ask, sorry about that, and you want to ask someone about you need insurance. Your main parts of that are typically going to be no matter what type of business you're in, and everything again is going to be geared to the type of business that you have. But you're mainly going to start with your general liability. We're going to have your business property. You're going to have an auto policy. You might need workers' compensation and then a business continuation plan. But those are kind of our key parts that every business is going to need to get started or, when they do have insurance. So, liability, when you think of liability, as you can see on the screen here, you're going to think of what's going to protect you in the event of somebody getting injured at your expense. So, slip and falls are probably the number one liability claim that we would have here in Florida. And that's going to be, say, you've got a wet floor or there's clutter and someone comes onto your property. Say, for example, you own a grocery store and they walk in and something's on the ground and they slip and break their arm. That's where your liability. So always think of liability as that third party, that we're protecting you to make sure that if you were to get sued, you've got plenty of coverage in the event of something like this happening to you. The next thing we'll talk about a little bit is property damage. So that's when something is damaged. It could be by an employee, it could be by somebody else, but the property is damaged at a location. So, for example, say you are a plumber and you go in with some of your tools and whatnot, and you you hit a countertop, and next thing you know, you broke the countertop and you've caused property damage. That's when your property damage comes in. You've also got your personal and advertising injury, so that's when your reputation, somebody's You put something out there maybe on Facebook, and next thing you know, someone's suing you because you've advertised inappropriately or done something that's caused you to get in trouble. Again, liability is always protecting you for doing something to someone else. So just kind of keep that in mind when you think of liability. And then there's also the products completed section of that. And that's if you have like a defect, or something that's not working properly. And because of that, it's caused damage to property or an individual or something along those lines. So liability is very, very important to have. That's what, again, protects you in the event of a loss to a third party. So, business property insurance. There's different things that fall within that. That's going to be, so for example, say the chamber here, they have a general liability policy as well as property on their policy. That's going to protect their building. So say something happens to the building in the event of a hurricane. It's going to also cover your office furniture and computers. You're going to have, say, maybe retail space that has inventory. Or if you're an artisan contractor and you've got tools that you need to make sure they're all protected in the event of a loss. So your property is going to cover the property that you own. And it can be, again, different things that are within your building. Office furniture and computers are obviously a big one. There's also different things, and you can talk with your insurance agent about. And I was talking with Dana earlier today, the importance of making sure you have a very good relationship with your insurance agent. I almost would refer to myself, instead of as an agent, as an advisor, because I want to have that relationship with my clients, that I know exactly what they have. That way I'm insuring them properly. It's very easy to uh, not do a review with someone. I just met with someone earlier this week, and they handed me their policy. And I'm like, this isn't what y'all do. And they're like, well, yeah, no, they said it's fine. And I'm like, I think it probably was 20 years ago from what y'all are telling me, but things update, things change. So make sure when you're talking with your insurance agent, you have that very good relationship with them, because your property changes often. The the chamber just updated all of their computer stuff. So maybe we need to make sure there's higher limit coverages on that. So those are always the important things to do when you're talking with your insurance agent and you're looking at your policy. Inland marine, it's a very fun term. I'm not sure why they termed it this, but that's what it is termed. But it is more like for movable property or equipment. So I should have changed some of these slides out, but it's going to be, we do a lot of tractors and different items like that. So that's what your inland marine, which is part of your property, protects. So it's important to know what pieces of equipment you have and whether you want it insured or not. You don't necessarily have to have it insured, but you want to make sure you have that. It can also involve your equipment breakdown, which goes back to your businesses that say, we're here and the AC breaks down. You want to make sure those type of things are covered in the event of a loss, because you want to be able to continue to work. And inland marine, I know, again, it sounds kind of funny, but it's more for movable property and different things along those lines. Now we'll get into commercial auto. Commercial auto policies, they're exactly what they sound like. Therefore, your commercial vehicles are out on the road. You're going to add all of your drivers, make sure that they have a valid driver's license, make sure your vehicles are in good working order. You want all of those things to come along as well as you can. This is what's going to protect you in the event of an accident. So back to the liability coverages we're talking about right here. That is, say you get in an auto accident, you want to make sure you have enough coverage to where you're not going to end up getting sued in the event of an auto accident. What happens oftentimes is the state will have minimum limits and you just go with that and think you're good. Or a lot of people will keep if it's a smaller business, they'll keep it on a personal auto policy versus changing it into a commercial auto policy. It's so important. If you're running a business, make sure it's on a commercial auto policy. In the event of a loss, you want to make sure that insurance agency doesn't have a reason to not cover you. So make sure what you have is properly insured, because again, that liability is what's going to protect you. Someone gets in an accident, one of your employees hits somebody while driving down the road, and that person has to go to the hospital. That liability limits what's going to protect you in the event of a loss. So you want to make sure, again, you have enough coverage in case something along those lines happen, because we don't want someone coming after you, your company, or you for your assets. These are some of the information that you want to share with your agent when you are getting a quote. We're going to want to know, the scope of the operation. Exactly what are you doing? Where are you going? How far is your radius of operation? Are you staying within the state of Florida? Are you staying within, 50 miles, 100 miles? Those are different rating factors that are important to know. So just keep that in mind when they're asking you those questions. It's because they're rating it. A loss run is so important. That is another thing that rates your policy. And what a loss run does is it talks to us and lets us know how many losses you've occurred and what time. Usually insurance companies want to go back the last 3 to 5 years. I know Farm Bureau is 3 years, but a lot of companies do want to go back 5 years. Your drivers, make sure you're comfortable with who's driving your vehicles. We will need their driver's license, their the date of birth, and the relationship. A lot of times you'll have a business owner with their child, or whether it's an employee. So those are different things like that. How the vehicle is titled is another very important part. So your registration, again, as companies grow, you start out with your vehicle that you bought, and then now you're 5 years in and you're driving around in your truck that you personally bought, but it's not titled in the company. Make sure you have things properly titled as well. That's another important part of your auto insurance. All right, workers' compensation. I wanted to talk a little bit about that because I recently had someone who came to me. I started out by insuring their cattle guard or cattle chute gate. And after talking with him, we got that insured. And then talking with him, I find out that he has a large landscape business and he does a lot of work for FDOC for various counties in the state of Florida. And I was working on quoting all of his business, his general liability, his property, his auto, and we were doing good. I did tell him some things we're going to have to change because the way it was rated wasn't accurate. And he calls me one day and he says, "Carol, I got a stop work order from Department of Transportation." I said, "Well, what for?" And he said, "Because he said I don't have workers' comp." And I said, "Well, do you have it?" And he said, "Yeah." I go, "Well, send me over your policy." So he sends it over to me. And again, this is a company that's got 20 employees. He had a workers' comp exemption, and that was it. And that is why he had no workers' comp on any of his employees. So there's a couple things with that. One, his insurance agent that he had, not me, filed his exemption form, which you're not allowed to do as an agent. And one of the reasons that you're not allowed to do it is because when you're filing that exemption, you also have to watch a video, and it tells you, it would have told him right then and there that he needed workers' compensation insurance. The other thing was, again, he had no coverage on any of his employees, so now he was not allowed to continue his contracts that he had with DOT and everybody else. We were able to get him insurance. We were able to take care of him, but it goes back to my find an insurance agent, like anything you're doing in life, that you are comfortable working with, that you talk to on a regular basis, and that you don't just, you know, hand them stuff and pay your bill and hope for the best. So make sure you talk with your insurance agent. I can't express that enough, is making sure you're with someone that you're comfortable with and you're confident in their ability. Again, workers' comp, it protects you in the event of an employee getting injured. So for officers or for owners, you can have a max of 3. There's different guidelines for whether you're in a construction industry, or whether you're just in a regular retail, or different types of business. So again, make sure you're talking with your insurance agent, letting them know the number of employees, letting them know your scope of work, different types of work. I have a lot of customers who do grading of land, which is great. But then when you start doing packing for house pads, that puts you into a different category. So again, follow up with your customers, talk to them, or your insurance agent. Make sure you're talking to them and make sure you're getting what you're supposed to have on your policy. All right, a business continuation plan. A lot of people don't talk about this. They start out their business and they're excited. They've just started, and they've spent every last dime they've got. And then 10 years down the road, they have built this very successful business. They're doing great, and they've got a business partner, and they don't put together a business continuation plan. And what I mean by that is, typically you have like a buy sell agreement. So for example, say Dirk and I are in a business together, and we're both painters, and I pass away, and my portion of the business now goes to my kids, who are 18, and he can't get them to show up to help him paint a business for anything. You want to make sure you have a buy sell insurance agreement that covers that, to in the event of one of your partners passing, you now get to take complete ownership of that business, versus having to be partnered with someone who doesn't know anything about the business, doesn't want to know anything about the business. And you're able to keep that business going. It can also help. I met with a local AC company and explained to them, well, we need to have this continuation plan put in place. And they said, well, why? If something happens to the owner, and they've probably got like 30 employees. Something happens to me, he goes, I'll just sell, and my wife can take all the money. And I said, I think that's a great plan. I said, but let me ask you, how long do you think that'll take? And how long? You've just told me how these 30 employees of yours are like family to you. How long do you think that's going to take to sell your business? And he goes, oh, we're super successful. It won't take any time at all. I'm like, no, you're probably right. But by the time you do a business valuation, you put the business up on the market for someone to buy, and then they buy it, and the closing and everything. I said, do you think a year's enough time? And he said, yeah. And I said, okay, well, y'all can't operate under your license when you've passed. So we need to put together a plan that can get them through that first year. Keep your employees working. You don't want to lose your employees to lose any of that stuff, or their jobs. Let them take their time to go find a new job. Let the business continue to running. So that's something a lot of people don't plan for, but it's, to me, just as important. You can also do key man insurance. If one of your key employees passes, and there's a big, I've opened my business 20 years later, I've got a key person, and I'm off on vacation and in the Bahamas every week, and I've got one person running my business. That person passes, you can, have some insurance money to where it helps you get through those time frames. So that's kind of what a continuation plan does, is it protects the business and it protects the employees as well. All right, understanding your risk and exposure. Um, So back to the liability. When we talk about that, I had a guy call me the other day, and he's like, they want $1 million liability. I said, that's okay. That's very, very, very common. Most policies do start out with a 1 million per occurrence, 2 million aggregate. And what that means is it's 1 million per occurrence. So say something happens, liability, and you're getting sued, it's 1 million. But say you get sued twice that year for an accident that's happened, that you've caused, not a workers' comp, but a liability accident, third party, and you've had two that year. The aggregate's what covers you for multiple policy or multiple instances in a year. So this is a very standard limit. Don't be alarmed when you see that. I don't think I've even written anything under that ever. I don't even know if it's possible, because I know for some certain liability things you can, but that is very common to have that. And in today's world, think about it. Someone goes to the hospital and they just need to get some x-rays and whatnot. Your bill, just getting to the hospital, getting x-rays, getting follow-up treatment, it can easily run into 100,000 right off the bat. So just keep in mind those are normal limits. And goes right along with your products completed. Same thing. I missed a zero in there. Apologize. Um, Damage to premises rented to you. So maybe you're renting something. Those are all common parts of a liability policy when that's getting put together for you. So those aren't necessarily something you need to um, you don't need to ask your insurance agent necessarily about that. Your insurance agent should be asking you questions and building a policy that fits you. Definitely ask questions, communicate, be as open and honest with your insurance agent as you can, because you never want to get into a situation where something's not covered because you didn't put that on the policy. Deductibles, that's another, part of your policy. Typically with when I do a commercial general liability, I like to do $1,000 to start out. It's always, you want to work with your customer and make sure there's a balance between price. You want to make sure it's something within your budget. But in the event of a loss, you want to make sure you have enough assets to cover that deductible. It's easy to sit down and with your agent and say, nope, I don't care if it's $10,000. Nope, I just want this price. But then you have an accident and you're getting sued and you've got to come up with $10,000, and all of a sudden you're like, well, why'd you give me such high deductible limits? It's important to know what those deductibles are in the event of an accident. So keep that in mind. Other parts of a policy are going to include endorsements and exclusions. So endorsements can take away from your policy, and endorsements can add to your policy, and exclusions will take away. So there's all kinds of different endorsements. Nowadays, we think about cyber. How many people get hacked? So that's a big one. Pollution. I do a lot of farms and ranches and stuff, and so pollution is a big one. If there's a chemical drift, and my customer was out spraying his pasture and it drifted and blew into someone else's field and it just killed all his grass, and he's a sod farmer. So there's all kinds of different endorsements that you want to make sure you have protection on. And again, talk with your insurance agent. Make sure that what you need covered is what you have covered. All right, common gaps and mistakes. So, not updating the policy. You want to make sure, especially if you're a larger business with a lot of pieces of equipment, or if you're, as you're adding drivers, make sure you have someone. A lot of times too, it'll be a CSR or an office admin that you have their phone number, and to call them and say, hey, I just added a driver to my policy. Can I just hire this guy? Can I make sure I add him? Make sure you're calling and updating. I like to do a minimum of an annual review with my customers to make sure their equipment's up to date, to make sure their drivers are up to date, their vehicles. I can't tell you how many times I've sat down with someone to do a review, and they're like, "Oh, we sold that vehicle 6 months ago." And you're paying for this, and we can backdate and help with that. But it's definitely a lot easier. You've just paid for 6 months worth of insurance. And so you don't want to do that. So that is a big mistake that people make, is they're not updating their policy. And then as your business grows, that's where a lot of gaps fall into place. You want to make sure as your business grows throughout the years that you don't just keep renewing that policy. Make sure you're telling your agent what has grown. How many employees do I have now? What different types of lines of business am I doing now? Has that changed? So make sure you're doing that. I had another customer who, when he started, he built boat trailers, and he had like 15 employees. By the time he got done, 30 years later, he had 125 employees, and the boat trailer portion was the smallest part of his business. So again, make sure you're communicating, make sure everything's properly insured, and that what your risk is, that you have insured. All right. The claims process is pretty simple. Notify your agent immediately. And when you notify your agent, they always ask, do I need pictures? Do I need this, that? Every little bit of information that you can provide helps that claims adjuster. So the more information you have, the easier it is for that claims adjuster to understand the picture and the story. It's kind of like when I go to write something, if I just type in, well, it's a chamber. Well, and I guess most people know what we do at a chamber. But if you just simply say one word and you don't elaborate on what's happening, then it's harder for an agent or a claims adjuster to understand what's going on. So the more information you provide, pictures aren't required, but if you have pictures of your inventory, if you have pictures of vehicles, if you can show all of these different things, the more you can show, the better off you are, because it just makes their life easier and can properly get your money back to you that you need. So make sure you do that. And that's really about it for insurance. These are some of the other services that Farm Bureau Insurance provides. I know I talk about uh, ranches and farms, and our name, as it implies, is Farm Bureau. But we're like some of the other local agencies here. We do more than just farms, so we can also do personal home and auto, life insurance. We have banking services as part of Farm Bureau. So if I can uh, get anything across to you guys today, find a local agent, someone you can sit down with, meet face to face. Also has the ability to operate over the phone, but sit down with someone that you are comfortable with and that you definitely feel like what you can trust and have a very good relationship with. And that's about it.
Yeah, I have a quick question if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So a lot of us do a lot of um, research on what are good auto rates and whatnot, but when it comes to commercial, what is usually the main difference between price wise between our personal policies and a commercial policy? Is it really expensive for people to get the commercial?
Actually, I have found when someone, and again within Farm Bureau, we're a conservative firm, but for example, say it's an AC company because that's one of our preferred industries, and it's an
Mhm.
artisan contractor. I have found if someone had, they started their business and they had it in a personal policy and we moved it to a commercial, their rate was less. So, and one of the key differences too, when you're looking at it, a personal auto policy is 6 months, whereas a commercial auto policy is 1 year.
Okay.
So I have found that the rates per vehicle are oftentimes less. It's going to have to do with several different factors. The risk that's involved, what is your business? What do you do for a living? What is your radius of operation? Are you staying within 50 miles? Are you a service type industry, or are you a contractor? So all of those different things play a role. Um, so it's one of those things you gotta, and there's so many factors that come into play when you're looking at a rate. So it's best to just call and find out the prices
Okay.
and get to know exactly what it is. But oftentimes it is less than a personal policy.
Very good. The other thing that intrigued me was you used the term agri-tainment.
Yeah.
What is that?
That is such a popular new thing going on in the state of Florida in particular. Um, we've seen a lot of farmers and ranchers. I'll use the Chapmans or the Hastings or the Partons.
Okay.
The Chapmans have a large cattle ranch here in Osceola County. And as things have evolved in Osceola County. They now have a blueberry you pick. You can go out and pick your blueberries
Right.
and do different things like that. You've got the Hastings they have a little cattle ranch, but then during fall, they'll do a fall festival. So an agritainment is going to be a fall festival, a you pick. It's also all the wedding venues at barns nowadays. You've got all these beautiful wedding venues that you can go to, kind of like the one that we just went to the other day for Politics in the Barn.
Mhm.
Lavender on the Lake is a great example of, they have, a farm portion where they grow lavender and different things, but now they've built this amazing agritainment, and you probably saw some of their agritainment signs, but you've added this agritainment to your farming or your ranching need, and so that is how that comes into play. It's becoming very, very popular to where Farm Bureau has gone out, and that's become an endorsement you can add to your liability policy. Most oftentimes, you've got to get a separate policy for that, but you with Farm Bureau, you can actually add it to your liability policy.
Very good.
So we have
Does
a
anybody,
lot of people
excuse
here
me,
in
sorry.
town that do it.
I'm sorry. I
No,
thought
you're
you were
fine.
done. Does anyone else have questions?
Carol, I did. Kind of back
Sure.
on the auto insurance one. So as a small business owner, meaning just me right now,
Yes, sir.
I do use my vehicle to travel from here to Jacksonville and sometimes even to up in Georgia.
Right.
But that's not a lot, but it does
Okay.
happen. Is that something that I still should consider, or maybe not until I get a certain kind of amount of usage that I don't have?
So, that's one of the things too I would look at. You on personal auto policies, you can list it as commercial use.
Hmm.
Um, and I have found again with Farm Bureau, and I'm basing this off Farm Bureau experiences, if you switch it over to a commercial policy and you're listed as a financial advisor or something along it, you'd be classified the same way like I'm classified.
Okay.
It oftentimes is less expensive. If and when I was talking about radius, like 50-mile radius, it's what do
Mhm.
you do on a normal basis? That
Right.
doesn't mean, okay, well, I've got a commercial, because oftentimes we'll have a commercial vehicle that we have it listed as commercial, but it's also used as our family vehicle if we're going to vacation in say Georgia.
Hmm.
So if you do it on occasion, it's not a big deal. If you're doing it once a month, then yes, let your insurance agent know that you're going there once a month and that you're going there more often than not, because you want to
Okay.
make sure it's properly rated.
Okay.
But
All right.
again, let that agent tell them what you're doing. Let that agent kind of decide whether that needs to just be listed at 50 miles radius, 100-mile radius, or if you're doing it often, then it needs to definitely be updated.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, if there are no other questions, then we're going to thank Chamber Board Member Carol McCorkle of Farm Bureau Insurance for a great presentation. And if you need insurance, obviously, Farm Bureau and Carol are trusted chamber members, and we highly recommend them. So, thank Carol. Thank you for
Thank
your
you guys.
presentation.
Thank you guys.
Again, we want to encourage you to make the toolkit part of your monthly business education routine. And we appreciate our sponsors and invite you back for another installation of the toolkit. Thank you, everybody. Bye
Thank
bye.
you.